ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, wanted to talk about Transformers number 9, written by Daniel Warren Johnson, with art by Jorge Corona, color by Mike Spicer. First thing I kind of want to get out of the way, there's actually a lot of really cool commentary in this issue that I feel like the core of it largely being the Decepticons and how some Decepticons view humanity versus some other things. I don't know, maybe this was by accident, I don't know. I don't think any of this is by accident or like in a vacuum or anything, but we saw just in a couple of previous issues how Thundercracker feels about humanity, and we saw Thundercracker show mercy, or even at the very least seem confused when Soundwave was willing to unalive a bunch of humans who honestly posed none of them any threat whatsoever. And in this issue, we get to see something really cool in regards to Astrotrain. Astrotrain, while he is actually trying to abduct Spike, which I actually love the fact that he never at any point just refers to Spike as Spike. He is always the long-haired human, or the Spike with long hair, or he always refers to him as his description, not so much just by his name. I thought that was actually pretty cool on Astrotrain's part. It was very interesting tone to take with him. I thought it was pretty awesome to see. But the thing I liked about it was the fact that in this, we also see a very similar attitude towards humanity and destroying things weaker than yourself from Astrotrain. This is something I love to see. I love seeing, and it's not to say we've never seen this before. We have seen stuff kind of similar to this in the IDW Transformers universe to an extent, but I feel like here, not to say that it's just done so much better, but I like the idea that we're, not hiding from it, that we're kind of showing that the Decepticons, while yes, they are a body of people, they are not a monolith. Like the idea that Soundwave is perfectly fine unaliving a bunch of humans, but Thundercracker thinks there's no real merit in it. They pose the Decepticons no harm, no real actual harm, so why hurt them when you don't have to? And I like the idea that in this, Astrotrain has a very similar way of thinking, but at the same time, he is willing to unalive a bunch of humans to get what he wants. And what he wants is Megatron. He wants to get his hands on Megatron, and he wants to get his hands on Megatron now. And really, the only way to achieve that is to help Soundwave in what he wants. So that is why Astrotrain is doing what he's doing. He is willing to destroy all humanity in front of him, standing before him in a hospital right now. He recognizes that they're weaker than him. He recognizes that there's no real merit or honor in destroying something weaker than yourself, but at the same time, he's willing to do it to get what he wants. And I think that that's a level of nuance you don't get to see from Decepticons very often. I also appreciate he doesn't really have any real beef with humans. Like in this, we see a moment where he's talking with Spike, and the conversation is such that you get the impression that maybe if it was a different time, a different place, Astrotrain and Spike could just as easily, I won't say have been friends, but at the very least, not hated one another. Like I could easily see in a situation where if there was not a war between Autobots and Decepticons, Astrotrain would probably take sympathy on Spike on some level or another. And I thought that was something really cool to showcase in this. Even when Spike is explaining to Astrotrain that what the Decepticons are planning to do to basically sap the resources of Earth, which, to be fair, is kind of funny how Cybertron is devoid of resources right now. Yeah, Astrotrain sees Earth as having an infinite wealth of resources when in fact Earth itself does not have infinite resources. But in terms of what the Decepticons need right now, Earth may as well. But I thought it was interesting that he feels sorry for Spike, and maybe even to a greater extent humanity itself. And he even seems to apologize about the fact that he knows Spike is going to be tortured and experimented on by Soundwave, and more specifically Shockwave, who made his triumphant return in the previous issue. The whole dynamic here, it just the door to have such better storytelling for the Decepticons, to make them less cartoonish. Yes, are there still cartoonish Decepticons? Oh God, yes. Shockwave is literally a mustache twirling villain, and I love him for it because you need that sometimes. And Soundwave, I feel, is complex. I feel like Soundwave is an ends justify the means kind of character. It's not to say the Shockwave isn't that either, but you could tell that Soundwave, of the two characters between himself and Shockwave, Soundwave probably has the greater capacity to think differently. He's just not doing it right now because it doesn't suit his purposes. Like, that's just kind of how I see this. And I think it's pretty cool. I think it's actually pretty cool. Another cool thing about this comic as well is that, I mentioned Shockwave earlier. We get some allusions to what happened the last time that Shockwave had encountered Optimus Prime and the gang, and it's heavily implied by Optimus Prime that the last time they fought, Shockwave was not the winner, though Shockwave implies that Optimus cheated, which is probably just to say that Shockwave tried to cheat but got caught slipping just the same. Maybe Optimus probably had some help, or someone came in and maybe someone slid in the ring or threw some brass knucks in the ring for Optimus to help him get a one-up. I don't know. But, it's all awesome here. Plus, I know you're probably thinking, why wrestling analogies? Well, Daniel Warren Johnson is a huge fan of wrestling, and we get to see Shockwave perform some wrestling maneuvers in this issue, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, we get to see Shockwave perform a tombstone pile driver. To see this, I am absolutely positively shook at the notion that Shockwave is channeling the dead man. And of course, as I was talking earlier about the relations between the Decepticons and humanity, we also get to see the Autobots reintegrating with some of the human survivors, and there's some really cool commentary there. Carly is still not happy with not being trained to fight the Decepticons, which I feel like Carly right now, she's my least favorite character, but I think that's probably on purpose. She is being purposefully annoying and being written purposefully annoying because she is grieving, as I talked about earlier in a previous video. This is a natural thing that has to happen, so I'm here to roll with it. But I feel like, yeah, at some point, Carly is probably going to get somebody killed. That is a very harsh reality. Speaking of, we get to see Autobots sacrificing themselves for the greater good in this issue, which I think is fantastic. Seeing, Cliff Jumper, like, literally on the verge of being blasted into the upper room by Shockwave in the hands of Soundwave, no less. Transformers dying, it's not a new concept. We've been dealing with this since the 80s. But just the idea of Autobots laying down their lives and kind of seeing how they ultimately fall for the cause of being a part of the Autobots, fighting for the right of all sentient life, and so on and so forth. It's heartbreaking to see, especially because this is a series that doesn't treat any particular characters as being too precious to be, killed off. And while technically, yes, some of the characters that have been killed off aren't necessarily the most like, oh my god, fan favorite character, but the idea that even just Bumblebee being killed off in the first issue was kind of a statement of intent. Has Optimus Prime been killed off yet? No, but he came very close to it. Not 2 or 3 issues prior. He was about as close to dying as you could possibly get. I think that says a lot. I think that says a lot for, the story and what it's trying to do. And the fact that it's Ratchet makes it no less heartbreaking, because Ratchet is one of those characters who is if you're a longtime Transformers fan, you know who Ratchet is. Ratchet is that character that's just always there, and he's kind of in this series, he's definitely more of the moral compass. Not to say that Optimus needs one, but the fact that he's the one who kind of tries to help keep Optimus on message, and not just with his own ideals, but even with the ideals of the other Transformers. And I feel like his loss is going to be felt, and it's not to say he can't come back. We have seen that, some of the characters that die, they can come back in different ways. Sometimes different, maybe sometimes lesser, but it can happen. And I'm curious to see what's going to happen to Cliff Jumper now that he is in the clutches of the Decepticons, because they make it pretty clear they're going to do some things to him, and he is not going to enjoy it. Not only is Cliff Jumper getting drug away, though, we also can't forget Jazz is also being drug away as well, so that is definitely something to keep an eye on. But yeah, a lot of the staples of the Transformers franchise we get to see in this. We get to see the space bridge. That's how Shockwave is able to make his way to Earth, despite the fact that he is nowhere near Earth right now, or at least when we had initially saw him in the previous issue. We also get to see the Combaticons. They don't exactly get to form Bruticus in this issue, but they make an attempt to, but ultimately are not allowed to. And this also kind of leads me to something that I've actually been meaning to address for a while. It's a mistake that I made about 2 or 3 videos prior, and I'm gonna go ahead and say right now, I don't really know how I made this mistake. I don't really know what the hell it was I was thinking. And once again, I think people make mistakes. It's a thing. There's a long-running gag on this channel that Carter, like, you know, from the Blerd Cave, likes to throw out that, oh, Ernie doesn't like to admit when he's wrong about something. It's like, no, I admit it all the time. It's just that, and it's not to make it sound like I'm so seldom wrong, but I mean, it's usually when people say that to me, it's usually people who are wrong when they're trying to convince me that I am wrong. It's like, I might not be right either, but you are also wrong. So neither one of us is right in this. It's one of those situations usually. But yeah, I've admitted in the past when I've made a mistake, and I've made a mistake for, like, I think the past 2 or 3 issues. There's a character in this that I kept thinking, like, because the way it was framed, it almost looked like a flashback. So I just assumed that the character we were looking at, because, you know, Cybertronian forms do tend to look a little bit different than the Earth forms. And that's something that goes all the way back to the comics. If you go back and watch, like, the old cartoon series, which is kind of what I had to do to realize I had made a mistake, and also just paying more attention as I was reading also kind of helped in that regard. And then what I realized was not a past version of RC, what was actually Elita 1, which is a character that I'll admit I'm not terribly familiar with. I mean, yes, she was in the original animated series, but by my recollection, I don't think she showed up until season 2. And season 2 is the part of Transformers Generation 1 that I didn't watch quite as much. Like, I watched enough of it to know a lot of the hallmarks of it, but Elita was not one of those hallmarks. Elita is a character who, she is important to the canon of Transformers, but because of the nature of what Transformers was at the time, it was a toy line that was honestly really only intended for boys to play with. So female characters didn't really get a lot of prominence. Like, to be fair, I actually looked this up. Elita never even got a transforming toy until about 2007, and she's been around since 1985. As a matter of fact, in the previous IDW comics, they never even showed her transform when she showed up. So it's one of those things, you could probably imagine why she's not a character that leaps out at me. To my recollection, the first female Transformer I ever saw was RC. Then it wasn't until, like, I realized going back, I was like, oh, actually, there was another one. But Elita was technically the first time we had ever actually seen a female Transformer to any effect whatsoever. But I never think about her. And because of the similarity in color scheme, I just assumed that was my mistake. I actually openly admit that. That was not RC, that was Elita 1. And what made it even more obvious was when I was reading this issue. And to be fair, I actually went back and looked. They actually, literally, she is referred to by the name. I just, for whatever reason, was not thinking anything of it when I saw it. Like, it just, the name didn't even, like, mean anything to me. All that aside, Elita is now on Earth, and we see this because she uses the space bridge to get to Earth with Ultra Magnus. So the stuff that we were seeing in the previous issues, I initially thought this was stuff that was happening in the past. It was actually all stuff that was happening in real time with everything else on Cybertron. And, you know, as we get to now, where, you know, Elita, who, for those who don't know, Elita as a character was the companion of Optimus Prime. She was actually kind of considered like his female opposite in a lot of respects. And you'll probably see a lot more of her as far as, you know, Transformer stuff goes, because if I'm not mistaken, she is one of the principal characters of Transformers 1 that comes out in September. And I feel like the character is kind of rising more and more into prominence. So it's actually cool to see. Like, once again, I totally cop to being incredibly loud and wrong at the same time on that regard. Like, but yeah, at the end of the day, I am happy to see that, you know, there will actually be more than just one female Transformer. I just hope that Daniel Warren Johnson doesn't do the thing that Walking Dead used to do with black characters, where a black character, if they showed up, it was like, oh, hey, we got a black character here. But then another black character would show up, like, and I'm talking about like early days Walking Dead, not today's Walking Dead. But like back in the early days, if you had one black character and another black character showed up, it was pretty safe to say that that black character that had been there all along is dead. It's like, nope, get him up out of here. I don't think Daniel Warren Johnson will do that, but yeah, I'm just being facetious when I say that. All in all, this was a solid issue. I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic. It did everything that I feel that a Transformers issue should do. It introduced some new themes. It actually kind of expounded upon some current themes that have already been looked at. And it also introduced some other characters. We got to see the Combaticons. We got to see Beachcomber out of nowhere, mind you. We got to see what is ultimately the return of Shockwave. And I can't say it enough. The Energon universe is just chef's kiss. This is about to become an Energon Universe stand account. I'm sorry, it just is what it is at this point. So yeah. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.